The Johnson family was buzzing with excitement as they packed their car for the long-awaited vacation. Marcus, the father, had spent weeks planning every detail. His wife, Angela, made sure the kids minus 12-year-old Mia and 9-year-old Jaden had everything they needed. The destination was a small, picturesque coastal town they had never visited before. For Marcus, this trip was a chance to escape his demanding job, though he rarely mentioned what he did for a living. To most people, he was just an ordinary dad, but his real work as an FBI agent was a responsibility he carried quietly. The drive to the town was smooth, filled with laughter and Mia's endless playlist of pop songs. As they arrived, the family couldn't help but admire the charming streets lined with boutique shops and cozy restaurants. Marcus parked the car outside a quaint hotel. Inside, the lobby smelled of fresh flowers, and soft music played in the background. However, something felt off almost immediately. At the reception desk, the clerk smiled at first, but quickly looked past Marcus as if he wasn't there. When Marcus confirmed their reservation, the clerk hesitated, double-checking the computer as though their booking couldn't possibly be real. "Oh yes, here it is," she said after an awkward pause, handing over the keys. Marcus caught Angela's eye, and they exchanged a knowing look. Still, they shrugged it off, not wanting to let a small moment ruin the trip. Once in their room, the family unpacked and talked about their plans. The kids wanted to spend the day at the beach, and everyone agreed it was the perfect way to start their vacation. The next morning, they set out early, with Marcus carrying the cooler and Angela holding their beach umbrella. They found a spot near the water and settled in, the kids racing toward the waves with their boogie boards. For a while, everything felt perfect. The sound of the waves, the warmth of the sun, and the sight of the kids playing made Marcus feel like this trip was already a success. But Angela noticed something strange. A group of people sitting nearby kept glancing at them. She tried to ignore it, but the stares felt heavy, almost intrusive. "Do you see that?" she whispered to Marcus. He glanced over briefly, but told her not to worry. As the day went on, the unease lingered in small moments. When Marcus went to a nearby shop to buy ice cream for the kids, the shopkeeper seemed unusually cold, barely making eye contact. Angela grew more concerned, but kept it to herself, wanting the kids to enjoy the day. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of what would become a vacation they would never forget. The Johnson family was enjoying their time at the beach. The sun was warm, the waves were gentle, and laughter filled the air as Mia and Jaden played in the water. Angela took pictures of the kids, while Marcus set up a small picnic on the sand. Everything felt peaceful, but Angela couldn't shake off the unease she had felt earlier. She noticed a group of people still glancing at them from time to time, their expressions hard to read. She didn't want to ruin the day, so she stayed quiet, hoping the moment would pass. After a while, Marcus suggested they take a walk along the beach. The kids ran ahead, their footprints dotting the wet sand, while Marcus and Angela strolled behind, holding hands. It was a beautiful moment. The sparkling waves and golden sky made them feel far away from any stress or worry. Yet, just as they were about to relax completely, they noticed something strange. A police car had pulled into the beach parking lot. At first, they thought nothing of it. Maybe the officers were just passing through or checking on something unrelated. But then, one officer stepped out and started walking toward them, his gaze locked on Marcus. Another officer followed, standing by the car and speaking into a radio. Marcus stopped, his calm demeanor unwavering, but Angela's grip on his hand tightened. "Excuse me, sir," the officer said, his tone firm but not friendly. "We've had some reports about suspicious activity in the area." Marcus raised an eyebrow, confused. "Suspicious activity?" he asked. "Yes," the officer replied, glancing at Angela and the kids, who had stopped playing and were now watching from a distance. "Some people have expressed concerns about individuals loitering near their vehicles and acting out of place." Marcus's voice remained calm. "We're just here on vacation, officer. Enjoying the beach with my family." The officer didn't seem convinced. "I'll need to see some identification." Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. He knew he had done nothing wrong, but the way the officer spoke felt loaded, as though the man had already decided he didn't belong. He reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out his wallet. Angela stepped closer to him, trying to keep her own composure for the kid's sake. As Marcus handed over his ID, the officer's partner walked up. "What's going on here?" the second officer asked, glancing at Marcus's family with a look that made Angela's stomach turn. She instinctively stood in front of the kids, shielding them. The tension was thick in the air. Marcus kept his tone steady. "We're not causing any trouble, just a family on vacation." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Then one of them muttered, "We'll see about that," as he turned and walked back toward the police car. It was clear that this encounter wasn't going to end quickly. For the Johnson family, their peaceful day at the beach had just taken a chilling turn. The officer came back from the police car, holding a radio in one hand and Marcus's ID in the other. His face was hard, his gaze sharp. He handed the ID to his partner, who glanced at it briefly before shaking his head. The two officers exchanged a quiet word, but their body language was clear. They didn't believe Marcus's explanation. Marcus stayed calm, though his jaw tightened slightly. Angela stood close, her hand protectively resting on Mia's shoulder. "We're going to need you to step aside, sir," the officer finally said, gesturing for Marcus to move away from Angela and the kids. "For what reason?" Marcus asked evenly, his voice calm but firm. "We need to ask a few more questions," the officer replied. Marcus nodded but didn't move. "With all due respect, my family has done nothing wrong. We're here on vacation. I've given you my ID. What more do you need from me?" The officer's face darkened, and his tone grew sharper. "Failure to cooperate isn't going to help your case." Angela felt her heart race. She could see how people on the beach were starting to watch, some whispering among themselves, others pulling out their phones to film. The kids, sensing their mother's unease, stayed close, their eyes wide with fear. "I'm cooperating," Marcus said, his voice still controlled. "But I think you owe me an explanation for why my family is being treated this way." The second officer stepped closer, his hand resting on his belt. "Sir, step away now, or we'll have no choice but to detain you." Angela couldn't stay silent anymore. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to be heard. "We're just here with our kids. What kind of threat do you think we are?" Her words seemed to annoy the officers further. The first one looked at her sharply and said, "Ma'am, I suggest you stay out of this." Marcus turned his head slightly toward Angela, giving her a reassuring look. "It's okay," he said softly, though she could tell he was as tense as she was. Then he turned back to the officers. "If you're going to detain me, at least tell me what law I've broken." Before the officer could answer, his partner moved forward and grabbed Marcus's arm. "Turn around," he said curtly. The kids gasped, and Angela stepped forward instinctively. "Wait." The first officer cut her off. "Ma'am, back up, or you'll be next." Marcus allowed himself to be handcuffed, his calm expression never wavering. He looked at Angela and said, "It's going to be fine." But in her heart, she wasn't so sure. As the officers led Marcus toward the police car, Angela quickly took out her phone and began recording. "This is wrong," she said loudly, her voice steady now. "You have no reason to treat him like this." The officers ignored her. One of them opened the back door of the police car and pushed Marcus inside. Angela kept filming, her anger rising. "You're making a mistake," she called out. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." She wasn't just talking about Marcus being a good man, a loving father, or even an innocent tourist. She was talking about something the officers didn't know, something that would change everything once they found out. As Marcus sat in the back of the police car, his mind raced. He remained calm, even though his hands were cuffed behind him. Years of training in the FBI had taught him how to control his emotions in tense situations. He wasn't afraid for himself. He knew he had done nothing wrong. But his heart ached thinking about Angela and the kids, left standing on the beach, scared and confused. He had to stay calm for them. Outside, Angela wasn't backing down. She had stopped recording for a moment and was now on the phone, her voice sharp and clear. "I need to report an incident of racial profiling," she said, giving their location. Maya and Jaden clung to her, their small faces pressed against her side. Meanwhile, the officers were talking quietly near the car. Marcus could see them glancing at him, their expressions a mix of suspicion and unease. He knew they weren't expecting any trouble. They likely thought he was just an ordinary man with no resources to fight back. They couldn't have been more wrong. One of the officers returned to the car and leaned in through the open window. "So, Mr. Johnson," he said with a smirk, "care to explain what you're doing in this town? Who you're really here to see?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I already told you. I'm here on vacation with my family. Everything we've done has been perfectly normal." The officer snorted. "Sure you are, but we'll see what comes up when we run your information." Marcus didn't reply. He simply watched as the officer walked back to his partner, who was now typing something into a laptop mounted inside their car. Marcus could hear bits of their conversation. "Nothing's coming up," one officer said, his tone laced with frustration. "He's clean." Still, they didn't release him. Instead, they stood there, debating their next move. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew the time had come to end this. Leaning slightly forward, he spoke in a firm, even tone. "I'd suggest you call your supervisor." One officer turned around, startled by Marcus's sudden authority. "Excuse me." "Call your supervisor," Marcus repeated. "Tell them you've detained an FBI agent without cause. If you want to avoid a very long conversation about why this happened, I'd recommend doing it now." The officers exchanged nervous glances. The smirk from earlier was gone. "FBI," one of them muttered. Marcus nodded. "My credentials are in the wallet you took. Feel free to verify them." For a moment, neither officer moved. Then, one reluctantly walked back to their car and retrieved Marcus's wallet. The other kept his hand on his belt, clearly uneasy. The tension in the air was thick as they searched through Marcus's ID. When they finally found his badge, their faces went pale. The officer holding it muttered something under his breath, and his partner cursed softly. Marcus remained silent, watching as the realization dawned on them. They had made a serious mistake. Still, they didn't unlock the car door. Instead, they stepped away, their voices low and hurried, as they made a phone call. Marcus leaned back against the seat, his expression unreadable. He could only hope Angela and the kids were okay while he waited for the inevitable fallout from the truth they had just discovered. The officers' nervous whispers outside the car grew louder, their confidence visibly shaken. One of them kept glancing at Marcus through the window, his unease clear. Meanwhile, Marcus remained composed, his gaze steady. He wasn't the type to gloat or intimidate, but he understood the gravity of the situation. These men had just crossed a line they couldn't step back from. Angela was still on the phone near the edge of the parking lot, her arm wrapped protectively around Jaden and Mia. She wasn't yelling, but her voice carried a sharpness that made it clear she wouldn't back down. "Yes, my husband is being detained without cause," she said firmly. "You need to send someone here immediately." The bystanders nearby had grown into a small crowd, their murmurs filling the tense atmosphere. Some were recording on their phones, capturing every moment. Others were whispering, clearly shocked by what was unfolding. A few brave voices even called out, "Why are you arresting him? He didn't do anything." One of the officers, clearly flustered, turned and barked, "Everyone needs to step back. This is a police matter." Marcus watched the scene unfold with a mix of concern and pride. Angela wasn't just standing up for him. She was standing up for their family, for their dignity. He wished he could reassure her, but he knew she was strong enough to handle this moment. The officers finally seemed to make a decision. The one holding Marcus's badge approached the car, his expression now a mix of apology and fear. He opened the door carefully and said, "Mr. Johnson, we, didn't realize who you were." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Who I am shouldn't matter. What matters is that you had no reason to detain me in the first place." The officer hesitated, then unlocked the handcuffs. As Marcus stepped out of the car, he straightened his shirt calmly. His composure only seemed to make the officers more uncomfortable. "We, received a report," the other officer stammered, trying to justify their actions. "It wasn't personal." Marcus met his gaze, his tone steady but firm. "It's always personal when my family's safety and dignity are involved. You judged us without reason, and you acted without thinking. That's a problem." The officers looked like they wanted to sink into the ground. Angela approached, still holding the kid's hands. Her eyes blazed with fury, but her voice was sharp and controlled. "You don't just get to walk away from this," she said. "We're filing a complaint. Your actions have consequences." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "We'll handle this the right way." Then, turning back to the officers, he added, "Expect to hear from your superiors soon." The officers mumbled apologies, but it was clear they knew this wasn't over. Marcus led his family away from the scene, his arm around Angela as Mia and Jaden clung to their parents. The crowd parted, murmuring words of support and admiration for how the Johnsons had handled the ordeal. As they walked back to their car, Marcus took a deep breath. This wasn't how he had planned their vacation, but he knew it was an important moment, not just for his family, but for everyone watching. Change didn't come easily, but it started with standing up against injustice, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.